Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, the number of people migrating to the UK has been greater than the number emigrating since 1994. At the beginning of the 2000s, EU net migration was below 10,000, a small fraction of the overall annual net migration, which was then around 180,000. But after the accession of 10 countries to the EU, such as the Czech Republic, Hungary, and of course Poland in 2004, this figure increased dramatically, rising to 87,000 in 2004. Now, the upward trend since then has continued, with EU net migration reaching 172,000 in the year ending September 2015. Now, that's more than half of the overall net migration coming into this country from EU and non-EU, which was 323,000 over the same period. Now, that's net migration, but the total number of EU nationals coming into the UK only, so not accounting for those who returned to the continent, was 257,000 in the year to September 2015. Now, those are the official statistics. Others have proposed alternative methods for calculating the number of EU nationals coming to Britain. In the same period, for example, 655,000 applied for national insurance numbers. And separate figures on the UK workforce published earlier this week show numbers of non-UK nationals from the EU working here in the past year has risen by 224,000 to reach a record total of 2.15 million. So, hope you followed all that. I'm joined now by the Labour MP and Leave campaigner Frank Field and the Deputy Director of Britain Stronger in Europe, Lucy Thomas. Welcome to both of you. Lucy Thomas, let me come to you first. Almost 2.2 million non-UK EU nationals working in Britain, and the numbers rising, the speed at which it's is going up every year. Is this a problem for your side of the argument?
Well, I think the fact that they are here and working and contributing into the system, and the fact that they paid over 20 billion in taxes since coming here. So I think that is a huge benefit to our economy, actually. And I think being in the EU with access to the single market, the world's largest, where almost half of our exports go, and having that free movement of people, which comes alongside that, that is a huge benefit for our economy.
So overall, the free movement of people and almost 2.2 million EU nationals are working here. That's not a problem, it's a plus.
It's an absolute plus, and it also means that British people can work and travel and study and retire across the rest of the EU as well. And there are roughly similar numbers of British nationals in the rest of the EU as there are EU migrants living
I'm not
here.
sure that's true, actually, because that was based... sorry, Frank's just checking the figures now on his phone. That was based on an IPPR study of that there were 2 million Brits in Europe, but it turned out that figure's not accurate.
Fine, well,
and the IPPR doesn't use it now either. Turns out it's closer to just over 1 million.
They're broadly in line.
No, they're not, actually.
Okay.
That's the latest research I've seen, but we'll check it. And
Well,
BBC reality check on this is good. Frank Field, it's not a problem. It's an asset. We're getting all these people highly motivated, many of them skilled. We've not even had to pay for their education in a lot of cases. The Spanish and the Italians have paid, and we get the benefit.
I think it's a real problem for two reasons. Despite all the fun you had earlier on, one issue did emerge. And I think all three of you thought the numbers were a problem. And I think they're a problem for two reasons. One is that we've never decided in this country what we as locals should actually sign up to as citizens. And we've had no idea to ask newcomers what we expect of them. So huge numbers of people have come, and instead of strengthening our culture, in some key instances have actually divided it. And I think that's bad for a nation.
Well, people coming from the EU?
Yes, I do.
Where has that happened?
Well, because you've got a whole range of religious, of different histories, and I think...
Most of the Poles are Catholics.
Yes, but most.
I think we're used to that in this country.
But most of this country aren't. But what I'm trying to
No,
make,
but that doesn't make a
what I'm
difference,
trying to
does
make
it?
the point is that there's something about common history and common memories which are important. But
Didn't we fight the Second World War together? And Polish pilots were a key factor in winning the Battle of Britain.
With Norman Tebbit, I've said, as well as the cricket test, we need the Battle of Britain test when we're making these decisions. But the second issue is the sheer weight of numbers, which maybe I was wrong, I was mishearing, that you actually all agreed on.
No, I didn't agree.
Well,
I just asked the question.
Oh, Zoe didn't. But if you were like the person in this imaginary country where the Labour spokesman didn't know where she was, clearly there's real problems about competition for jobs, for housing, for schools, for health. And it's that factor which actually has to register. So
the numbers in your view.
Yes.
Let me go back to Lucy Thomas here. Does it not matter that there's any cap on the numbers? I mean, it's generally accepted that the changes the Prime Minister made on in-work benefits will be marginal to the pull factor.
If that.
But the huge rise by British standards in the new national minimum wage will be a major pull factor. And so more could come from Europe. Does that matter in your mind, or is it something we should continue to welcome?
Well, I think we've got to look at what this referendum is about and what the options are of leaving and remaining, and the fact that leaving, all of the global economic experts, whether it's the IMF, Bank of England, Treasury, if you do what Frank's campaign wants us to do, which is to leave the single market and control free movement, that leads to recession. They agree with that.
Right, but that's
It's
a wider
risking
macro.
jobs.
I didn't ask you about the macroeconomics. I asked you a simple question, which is, given that the pull factors, and indeed if the Eurozone continues to stagnate, the push factors, because the interesting thing is a lot of the new ones coming now, they're coming not from the Eastern Europe anymore, they're coming from Spain, from Italy, from France, from Portugal. Does that matter that that could rise and that there's no cap on it?
Well, limiting free movement means limiting your access to the single market. So the two are absolutely intrinsically
So it's a
linked.
price
That is your choice.
It's a price of
You
being in
risk
the club.
jobs. You
It's a
leave
club
people
membership.
poorer. £36 billion a year, our public finances will be hit. Families will be £4,300 on average.
You don't believe that
worse off.
figure, do you?
I absolutely do, because all of the experts agree with
All
it.
right,
Tell me an
Frank.
expert on
Okay.
their side of the argument.
I want not to be too polite, did I? Because it will just run on. It clearly is an issue. The dangers aren't these, because none of us know. There's no set of facts when we turn up on referendum day. We'll make a decision from our guts about what we think's right for Britain. The one thing we have to be honest about, which is the Out campaign, is the real danger is what does it trigger in the rest of Europe. And it's in our interest that we so approach the renegotiations in a way that nobody feels that the whole place is going to be turned over. We want successful negotiations. We want the EU to be successful, rather than say we're coming out, this is the timetable, all of it. That's the danger on our side,
Right.
which I think we ought to put
But just
before the
sticking with the immigration issue, if you came out, which I guess would give Britain control over who would be coming from the EU or not. At the moment, we don't, because that is one of the basic rules of the membership of the club. How restrictive would you be?
I think we would limit it to the skills which we actually require.
So otherwise they couldn't come to work.
Absolutely.
That means limiting your access to the single market and your exports and your free trade, and hitting jobs and prices.
Because everyone who has access, even if they're not EU members, has to have pretty much free movement.
Yes, Norway, Switzerland. I mean, it'd be interesting. Frank, are you happy to accept that?
No, but I don't accept it.
That's the rules of the club, though. The rules
Well,
of
okay, let him
single
speak.
market access.
Let him answer and we'll see.
Can I come in, Lucy?
Yes, you
Lucy,
can.
the key fact is that nobody of our size has actually thought about renegotiating. It will be a totally different dynamic.
Why? What's the incentive for those remaining countries to give us a better deal than they have?
So let me just,
unravelling
can I
the
just
whole thing?
clarify?
It's very difficult to have an interview,
Don't
isn't
you
it?
worry, I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you a question
Yeah.
and you'll be able to answer it. Would it matter to you if the price of controlling the numbers who can come from the EU was that we did not have our current access to the single market?
It would. But because they have a balance with us, We
On
trade
trade.
less, yes. There is a self-interest aspect which would change the dynamism. I'm not pretending it's going to be simple. I'm not going to pretend that any old team we sent out would be successful, but we want to send the best team out to do the renegotiations. But we're not like Switzerland. We're not like Norway. We are in a different league, and the danger. I just want to make this point again, Andrew. It's not all these which are important but secondary issues. When we negotiate, we've got to make sure that the European Union doesn't actually unravel as a result of what.
Do you fear that it might unravel if we leave?
I do, because
Wouldn't that be a reason for not leaving?
it could be. And that's why the negotiations are so important, that we actually, what they want to arrange is up to them. As you know, the Prime Minister only conceded a vote to us to keep his party together. Many other countries, voters in other countries would like a vote like we've got.
So you think it could trigger that?
I do.
All right,
Let me must be really careful on that.
Let me bring back Lucy Thomas on this. Many economists would agree with you that particularly the EU influx coming to this country has overall been good for the economy. It's brought skills. People have done jobs that the British people have not been prepared to do, and so on. But it's also, it undoubtedly puts extra pressure on housing, on schools, on hospitals, on social security. And the politicians who've walked the walk on opening the doors have not talked the talk when it's come to increasing public spending on this. Isn't that a fair criticism? We can have all these people coming in, it may be good for us, but we still struggle to build 120,000 houses a year. We've been cutting education budgets. The NHS is now in a massive budget deficit. We've not spent the money to accommodate the extra people. Is that fair?
I don't think it is, and I think what is the key point about having strong public services, whether it's the schools and hospitals and so on that you talk about? You need a strong economy. A £36 billion hole in the public finances will mean weaker hospitals, weaker schools, weaker public services as a whole.
But people already regard our public services as weaker, and the NHS is running
even worse
a deficit.
Outside. They would be even worse.
So
Nobody says the economy is going to be
let me
better
get this
outside.
right. You don't criticise politicians for opening the door to these people. The number's gone up by 1 million from the EU since 2010. But you don't criticise the politicians for opening that door, but then not spending the money to increase our public services to accommodate the extra people.
That's a decision for governments in the past to decide how they're going to spend the money. I'm here to talk about the benefits of being in versus the very big risks to our economy of leaving. The fact that our public services are much stronger in, whether it's the 100,000 EU migrants working in our NHS across health and social services, and that extra tax receipts that we've had from EU migrants, £20 billion. Again, it's up to the government how to spend that, but the idea that a £36 billion hole in your economy is going to have.
Where does this £36 billion pound hole come from?
The Treasury report. About
The Treasury report. That's the one that told us what the economy would be like in 2030. Though last November it couldn't even tell us what the economy would be like this April.
Let's see who's backed up all of this analysis. The Bank of England, the IMF, who would...
Sorry to interrupt you again, but that's not true. The Bank of England did not do a long-term forecast. The Bank of England only did short-term forecasts because that is the monetary remit of the bank.
Well, there is a dispute on what size of the benefit, because quite properly people draw out. And the House of Lords report. Sorry, Lucy, I didn't interrupt you.
Just let him finish.
Ranting on.
That's very rude.
It wasn't a rant, but it was an interruption. But please continue.
The House of Lords, which has been, I think, the most serious study of this, thought there was a net gain, but it's in pennies. Quite properly, people come here and draw services. The key issue I thought we were talking about, Andrew, almost in the last session, was that if you don't have control of the borders, you've got a government which, as Lucy says, got a deficit, whatever that is, but we don't know whether it's going to be 3 million more people we're going to be budgeting for, or should be budgeting for housing, for education, for health. I just don't think you can run a country like this on that basis.
But you and I have lived through a time when this country was so on its knees that people were rushing for the door, and that people just wanted to leave and get out.
That's great news.
Is it not much better to be an economy where people are queuing up to come in?
I mean, even better if you're queuing up to come in and you're choosing who comes in.
All right. Zoe, quick response from you?
I just think this is radically unrealistic. I mean, the truth is they are net contributors. I don't really believe in bagging people up and weighing them by how much they bring in on how much they take. I don't think that's the way to talk about people, whatever country they're a citizen of. But if we are going to talk like that, they are net contributors. It's going to not only leave a huge hole in the public finances, it's going to plunge us into recession, and everybody knows that. It's going to be, the pound is going to go through the floor, interest rates are going to soar, we're going to be in a recession in no time. I mean, that is true.
Okay.
Under no objective study, could you say that Britain has control over immigration?